Hey guys, tonight we begin our gentle journey into the life of a French musketeer, a man of nobility and courage, or so the tales would whisper into the flickering candlelight. Take a moment to settle in, perhaps let your eyes grow heavy as we delve into a world where the mundane was dressed in bravery, and the comforts we know today were merely a distant thought. Picture a morning in 17th century France, the sun peeking slowly through a haze of clouds, casting a gentle glow over the cobbled streets of Paris. The air is imbued with the heady scent of damp earth, mingling with the last remnants of last night's rain. The familiar clatter of horse hooves echoes in the distance, accompanied by the occasional creak of wooden carts rolling by, heavy with goods and eager to start their daily deliveries. As our musketeer stirs from sleep, the bed becomes an echo of his dreams: stiff straw, a tattered blanket, probably woven from fibers that have seen better days. It is far from the luxuriously puffy pillows you might find today. Instead, we are welcomed by the firm embrace of a mattress devoid of springs, which may or may not be filled with what one would politely refer to as unnatural fibers. Imagine the musketeer stretching his limbs, his body stiffened by the chill of the morning air, though the morning isn't so much about comfort as it is about the anticipation of the day ahead. Rising from his bed, the musketeer navigates the small confines of his living quarters, perhaps a modest room located above a bustling tavern or below the watchful eye of a noble residence. The walls are adorned with rough plaster, streaked with age, holding on to the stories of the men who have walked here before him. Their scents mingle in a heady concoction, leaving reminders of sweat and stale tobacco that seem to cling to the stones, as if they too bear witness to history. Our musketeer dresses in layers of fabric, each article more intricate than the last, a blend of practicality and an earnest attempt at looking dashing. His shirt, white and coarse, offers little in terms of comfort but a sense of nobility that is hard to resist. The doublet he places over it hugs tightly, tailor-made for a figure that hopes to appear gallant while perhaps feeling more like a stuffed sausage. He slips into breeches that end just below the knee, from which long, fitted stockings stretch upward, carrying with them the rather pleasant aroma of mud and the hint of bacon grease, a delight from breakfast. What would he have for breakfast, you wonder? Well, it's not eggs Benedict or avocado toast but rather a humble bowl of porridge, yet this porridge is remarkably bland. Imagine the texture, a strange goo that resembles something between a soggy mattress and a bowl of tasteless oatmeal. Often, it is sweetened only with a sprinkle of honey, reminiscent of inconsiderate times when bees were more concerned about swarming than providing sustenance. With the call of Le Matin hanging in the air, our musketeer brushes his teeth with his own fingers, perhaps accompanied by the stray sprigs of rosemary. It's an interesting choice of dental hygiene, as it likely leaves his mouth feeling only slightly fresher than if he had used a small stone for the same purpose. They say cleanliness is next to godliness, or was that just an elusive quest for French musketeers? Now, as he steps outside, the world awakens in a symphony of sights and sounds. The bourdiers are setting up their stalls, shouting to attract customers with talents unparalleled by the modern marketeer. The vagrant aroma of baked bread wafts from the nearby boulangerie, warm, crusty loaves that nearly float on air as they pulse with possibilities. A few birds chirp their morning tunes, perhaps taking little care of the future of our musketeer's breakfast plans. And yet, the musketeer knows that all too often, the daily fare consists of hard bread and perhaps, if lucky, some cheese, mostly from goats who had seen better days themselves. His day unfolds in a rhythm that could easily be confused with a slow folksy melody on the lute. He may find himself polishing his armor, with the sound of metal on metal encouraging him to lose a few hours in the act. The clang resonates, echoing centuries of preparation for battles that are often fought not just with sword and musket, but with wit, charm, and that crucial air of confidence, because nothing says fearsome warrior like a shiny breastplate on a man with a cozy bosom. After some hours, he will take a moment to rest, and, like most of us, he may ponder the absurdity of how very lucky we are, in our own time, to be able to enjoy a warm cup of coffee or tea without the fear of it taking a turn for the bitter. But for a musketeer? A simple cup of water drawn from a nearby fountain would have to suffice, often befuddled by the unwholesome company of pigeons and other feathery miscreants. The musketeer might wash his hands in that very same fountain and shudder at how easily a day's daring could be washed away with a mere splash. As noon draws approach, dappled sunlight filters down through the leaves of great trees lining the lanes. Our musketeer is afforded some respite, a moment to contemplate the trivial concerns that plague many. Perhaps he dreams of companionship, or maybe, just maybe, of a day when his armor doesn't appear so bumpy. And as he flops down onto a bench, the scent of freshly baked tart auxiliary ponds nearby beckons. If only he could afford it. But alas, a musketeer's coin purses are often lighter than his sword. So, as we linger in this moment of mid-morning calm, take a breath and imagine the simple pleasures of life in the 17th century. Yes, life seems hard and, dare I say, rough around the edges, yet it is laced with quaint absurdities that perhaps give it a certain charm that might leave you wondering how anyone would ever survive without a daily scrub by the cuddly embrace of modern-day soap, because, let's be honest, their soap smelled like disappointment and goat. As you relax into the rhythms of this narrative, consider subscribing, if you haven't already. After all, who wouldn't want to journey further into the nuances of history filled with equally captivating tales? And when you do, share with us down in the comments your location, and the time at which you find yourself nodding off to this tale. As the day stretches before our musketeer, perhaps you too begin to feel the gentle embrace of sleep drawing near, like a soft shadow unfurling its wings against the early afternoon sky. In our mundane recountings of his day, we have stumbled upon the many small moments that can transform a simple existence into a tapestry of history, a history that swathes us gently in nostalgia even as it encourages the quiet drift towards rest. The musketeer's stomach grumbles quietly, a reminder that life is a series of trade-offs, each decision weighted with consequence. As he lifts a weary head, he considers the terrain that lays ahead, a battlefield of uncertainty not seen but certainly felt. The calming sunlight may bathe the streets in a warm glow, yet the musketeer's stomach holds memories of hearty meals long past, echoing through the corridors of a mind weary from remembrance rather than sustenance. The scent of tart auxiliary ponds lingers just out of reach, wrapping itself in sweet notes that play upon his senses like the strains of an ancient lullaby. Yet, he knows that in the world of the musketeer, such treats are but fables woven between the realities of hunger and the daily grind. The pastries flaunt their buttery layers and cinnamon-spiced allure like the distant dreams that keep uninvited company at the back of his mind. Each slice that twinkles before him whispers of privilege, a powerful reminder that the company he keeps is often marred by scant resources. With a resigned sigh, our musketeer rises from the bench, its wooden surface rough against his backside, much like the world he navigates. He reaffirms his commitment to his duties, from cleaning chamber pots to drilling under the watchful eye of sergeants more interested in their own agendas than the personal battles faced by each musketeer. His footsteps crunch against the gravel, reverberating into a rhythm that merges seamlessly with the cacophony of town life, vendors shouting about their wares, women gossiping while mending torn linens, and children darting through the maze of feet, unaware of the burdens that rest heavily upon the shoulders of soldiers. On these streets, the musketeer becomes just another face in the crowd, a well-known silhouette lost amid the vivid colors of market stalls. Food vendors display their wares with pride, from glistening fish freshly pulled from the brackish waters to casks of ale that promise a few moments of solace. Yet the musketeer hardly stops to linger, Each attractive display is a ghost whispering of indulgence he cannot afford, replaced instead by the bite of hunger gnawing ever so persistently at his insides, a cruel reminder that sustenance and choice are privileges few can truly savor. As he arrives at his barracks, the atmosphere shifts, acquiring an air of familiarity laced with strains of tension. The musketeers mingle, their voices rising and falling like the gentle waves upon a forgotten shore, each tide shaped by long-forgotten stories and unsung camaraderie. On cold days, it isn't just the blankets that wrap around their shivering entities, but the laughter shared over meager rations, a patchwork of warmth woven from the threads of shared woes and heroic tales spun from the dust of drudgery. The musketeer settles down for another round of armaments cleaning, polishing the barrel of his musket until it gleams, not from a sense of pride, but more from the sheer necessity of hefting a well-maintained weapon into unforeseen conflicts, hoping that the gods of war might bestow favor one last time as they polish precious metal through the routine of life. Metal clinks against metal, the noise mingling with a rhythmic thumping in the distance, an ominous reminder of preparations for the next mission that loom like dark clouds pregnant with rain. As he drags a cloth across the weapon, the musketeer's mind meanders to days in taverns where stories are exchanged in hushed tones, moments less about the bravery on the battlefield and more about mundane choices that turned catastrophic, such as misfortunes that could have been avoided by a mere twist of fate or a good, old-fashioned warning. His hands, now dusted with grime, imagine the touch of fine fabric, wings of smoke-filled rooms where laughter carried heavy loads and where wine flowed plentifully, each sip a soft reminder of vitality long endured and dearly missed. In those tavern tales, musketeers frequently become legendary characters, thriving in veneration through exaggerated exploits told by peers whose imaginations often wandered far beyond the limits of dusty reality. While his fellow musketeers weave them into shimmering threads, the musketeer fights against the call of sleep, carefully preserving the intricate tapestry of camaraderie etched across the fabric of their uniforms stained with remnants of past battles, each a testament to the shared burdens draped upon them like heavy cloaks lacking wherewithal to truly shield one from the elements. The day begins to draw to a close, the dusky light filtering through the high windows casting shadows long and lean, a deceitful tranquility settled upon the atmosphere. Yet for musketeers, this is merely the calm before the storm, mouth-watering under the flickering light of the hearth, darkness slips in under the guise of night, and the gathering chills the bones as stories continue, thanks to the warmth offered this time by the glow of flickering firelight. With too many hands reaching for the illusory comfort of righted wrongs, the musketeers plot their escape through jest and laughter, through playful ribbing and the kind of banter that dances atop despair. Jokes ricochet across the small communal space, bathing conversations in an infectious energy, their themes often revolving around hungry bellies and the days where sweeter things could be embraced without hesitation and guilt. Gusts of humor flutter through the air, wrapping each musketeer in warmth, even as they dangle precariously between duty and survival, a never-ending balancing act. As the embers fade into rich patterns of orange and gray, with soot-stained hands clasped together in familial embrace, tales swirl about like tiny leaves caught in a soft spiral of autumn air. Each artistically crafted narrative serves to mask the pangs of hunger. They dull the realization that the rumbles within are not simply soundtracks of a day gone by but an unraveling, the echoes of discontent, perhaps, but also of an unshakable loyalty whose strength grows as plates of gruel-filled bowls are shared. Underneath the cadence of hearty laughter lies shared glances, a deep-rooted understanding that they are still alive. Despite everything, they wear armor not just of leather and wool, but a solidarity forged in the crucible of struggle. And so for moments, the musketeers forget, fleetingly, the burdens of the day-to-day and slip into vivid imaginings of a world scented by the warmth of baked bread, where food fills their bellies, and comfort cradles their weariness, until once again the day draws to a close, enveloping them in the comforting embrace of night's quiet predictability. As bedtime approaches, this band of brothers disperses, unceremoniously retreating to their bunks, their dreams floating just beyond reach, perhaps of a brighter tomorrow filled with golden bread, or maybe even a little less dirt. Just as the musketeer snuggles into a pile of cobbled hay, he contemplates what could have been, but with all absoluteness, simply finds the quiet of a shared existence in solitude resonating with deep relatability. So, gently let the past hold sway over the present, reminding you that while sleeping arrangements might seem uncomfortable, we live in a realm rife with modern-day conveniences. For when you lay your head upon that soft and ducky pillow tonight, remember that it's filled with clouds of comfort, unlike those straw-stuffed remnants of life lived by musketeers long ago, made from whatever breadcrumbs or feathers dared to find a home. Rest easy, for the comforts of today elevate you to heights long sought after, where fears are swaddled securely away from the wars their ancestors bravely fought on sleep's behalf. Grainy sunlight spills across the darkened room, gently nudging the musketeer from dreams of half-empty feasts and slightly cleaner uniforms. The air hangs heavy with weariness, yet a softness awakens those huddled beneath threadbare blankets. Outside, the mundane sounds of daily life seep through the cracking walls, an argument from the market, laughter from children playing in the mud, and the distant clang of a blacksmith's hammer echo together in a chaotic symphony. The musketeer's day begins once again with the awareness of his disheveled state as he rises from the coarse straw of his makeshift bed. He stretches out his tired limbs, feeling the comforting crackle of aging joints, a familiar sensation, like that of old boots once worn too long. As he pulls on his woolen trousers that were perhaps slightly cleaner than yesterday, he cannot help but reflect on how the ongoing battles between his clothing and the dirt of the barracks seemed destined to be eternal. Today would undoubtedly be no exception. After wrestling with his waistcoat, a garment which concedes no near permanence in the realm of cleanliness, he peers into the tarnished surface of an old mirror. The reflections show him a weary face today mixed with a determined spirit. The days blend together as one, whispering the promise of familiarity, and yet, he longs for something more, a slumber that grants him a moment away from the gritty responsibilities of a musketeer. As he trudges toward the basin for the daily splash of water, clarity cuts through the fog of fatigue. The chill of the cold water feels like a brisk slap against his senses, a sudden reminder that he is alive. The agonizing reality of coordinating with the other musketeers at this shared basin weighs heavily. The communal area is flooded with the scent of grime and hasty grooming rituals in varying degrees of neglect. As he fills a tin cup, the musketeer lets the icy water run over calloused hands and gnawed fingernails, a soapy concoction of past battles and histories lurking within every drop. Last night's masterpiece soap, fragrant and pathetic, born of pig fat and potash, drags a quick reminder that cleanliness is an elusive goal here. The musketeer's attempt at sprucing himself is hampered by the knowledge that his fresh smell feels remarkably like disappointment and goat. Amidst laughter and bickering from fellow musketeers, he washes away the smudges of the day before, sending beads of water splattering against the slightly discolored walls, a damp testament to their morning rituals. Ever the pragmatist, he allows a chuckle to escape, as the sensation of scrubbing his face only makes him feel half better, perhaps just enough to step into the daily grind with a semblance of dignity. Now presentable, he navigates back through the barracks, where sounds of grumbling stomachs remind him that the breakfast table awaits, echoing with a precarious invitation to face the day's most daunting task, breakfast. Each musketeer shuffles forward in groggy resignation, glancing at the pooled remnants of previous meals left in earthenware bowls, all decorated with dried stains that give the room a wild palette of desperation. Breakfast, for the musketeer, exists as a forced ritual more than a gathering of replenishment. On especially temperate mornings, a discordant casserole of yesterday's bread and murky water, which they graciously refer to as coffee, emerges as the main dish. The musketeer swirls the liquid in his cup, that bitter concoction filled with the tan of age and a resemblance to muddy puddles covering village streets after the rains. The taste bites, awakening his senses reluctantly, yet each searing sip spurs on futile hopes of feeling alive. With each morsel of bread consumed, he savors the camouflaged regrets hidden within, crust scavenged from meager lodgings, reveling in an absurdly theatrical performance of chewing, where the sound of bones cracking becomes louder than mere appetite's voice. The bread, compact and stale, conveyed memories of yesteryears when every bite would be accompanied by the aroma of warm kitchens instead of the current dismal recollections of mouldy crusts and festering ambition lost. On particularly high-spirited days, there may be a fragment of cheese resting on the communal table, a smelly remnant that trembles between decadence and betrayal, both equally insulting to his palate. Yet, in a world where culinary luxuries seem to reside only in novels, it is savored, if only for a brief moment. The Musketeer offers a wry smile at the richness of the pungent smell. It tantalizes deeply, stretching the boundaries of what some might consider a treat. And yet, perhaps the finer absurdity lies in the collective solidarity with his Musketeer brothers, each one fighting their own culinary battles, sharing this reality where hunger masquerades as an old friend sitting at the table. The Musketeer raises his bowl in an awkward toast over the table, a brotherhood forged not solely through struggle but also through shared deprivation, heralded by low rumbles that echo within their collective chests. The camaraderie spins around the table, weaving moments of laughter and pensive glances in a way that many would describe as painfully beautiful. Once meals are consumed, the time burgeons onward, as musketeers set forth towards the day's responsibilities. Clad in various states of weathered leather and tattered wool, they maneuver through bustling streets, where the atmosphere radiates a chaotic vibrancy. The marketplace, with its hybrid smells of hay, animal waste, and stuttering conversations, greets them like an unwanted companion, a familiar property of daily life. Each musketeer steps cautiously, sidestepping puddles of uncertainty as they wade through the crowd, boots coated with the mud of discontent, convinced that perhaps a bit of resilience may wash away with every step. The thrum of bartering fills the air, with merchants selling everything from spices to wooden spoons, their voices weaving together into a jumbled aria that drowns out individual thoughts. Conversations flare as currency exchanges hands, reflecting a vibrant kaleidoscope of shouting and laughing that pierces his already fragile sense of comfort. Arriving at the barracks, the musketeer steels himself for the responsibilities unfolding within, where roused colleagues await. His presence feels a little like raindrops falling onto dry earth, necessary, perhaps expected, yet distinctly lackluster under a sunless sky. The day's work gravitates towards cleaning arms and inspecting supplies, each task imbued with muffled grumbles about their life under duress. The musketeers wander through daily rituals in the dim light of their quarters, where the comforting shadow of flickering flames mingles with the acrid stench of gunpowder. Here, camaraderie clings to the air infused with playful jabs and laughter, their words echoing the weariness that coats their reality, a shared melancholy that seeps into conversations about their duties. Stories begin to flow, thick and playful, about the proper way to ignore captain's orders or the peculiar antics of a horse mistaking an unguarded sack of potatoes as its own personal treasure. Every flicker of humor masks a layer of unspoken longing, a desire for freedom from the harsh realities of their station. With camaraderie prevailing, disguising the weight of their burdens, their lived experiences disclose that valor presents itself not only on the battlefield but also in the mundane aspects of their day, every ordinary moment laced with extraordinary feelings. When the day wanes and the cool embrace of dusk settles over the barracks, a small flicker of tension breaks through mock-serious conversations. They tire of stories cloaked in humor and seek solace in the tired rituals of shared scarcities. The musketeers mingle around a sputtering fire, their faces highlighted by a soft glow, as night pushes against the windowsill, solemnly inviting dreams that tease tantalizingly, the harshness of the day beautifully replaced by whispers of camaraderie. As night sweeps over, the musketeers disperse into corners both sound and silent, drawing towards their bunks like moths. The remnants of the day, toasts tinged with laughter, dirt-clad tales, and the reality that blankets them, gently relax into the corners of their minds like faded maps of lives lived under the looming canopy of duty. The heavy blanket of darkness folds in around the musketeer as he hunkers down, retreating to the cocoon of hay, finding comfort in illusions. Dreaming of a world where the sun rises over more than weary streets and tired bellies, he slips into sleep, holding on to fleeting memories of warmth and abundance as the house settles around him, hiding away their fears beneath layers of sweet slumber, a reminder of how different life could be. So next time when the hour draws near, and the battles of his life reside under the blanket of night, breathe a little easier, for in today's world, you have the luxury of blankets that are both soft and clean, pillows that are filled with comfort rather than absolutely nothing, and plenty of food, perhaps not as grand as a feast fit for a king, but enough to lull anybody else into dreamier realms, unhindered by rustic realities of times long past. If only musketeers could have traded their lives for modern comforts, one could only imagine the rank smell of sweat and rations could be exchanged for hot showers and takeout. Then again, they might have lost their taste for grand tales, filling hearts through friendship over shared dishes. Consider that as you find peace, knowing you can close your eyes and retreat to a realm free from the worries of daily bread. As the musketeer nestles himself further into the scratchy hay, he allows the thoughts of the day to dissipate like faint echoes in the wind. Wrapped in the dimmest light of the remaining coals, a stark contrast to the vibrancy of youth once promised to him, he drifts through the thin veil of sleep, serenaded by the soft crackle of dying embers. Each breath draws memories swelling and receding, just like the tides along the distant shores they long to protect. But before the musketeer drifts entirely into the fabric of dreams, he finds himself navigating a new morning. The heavy air mingles with the scent of grease and burnt wood. Nestled within those layers of familiar odor are faint whispers of duty, humility, and camaraderie, gentle reminders that his life sways like fragile fabric stretched over a rickety frame. The dawn gives birth to another day cast in the same mold of monotony. With his body reluctantly rising again, he stumbles through the shadows of his quarters toward the communal area, where the musketeers gather like desperate moths drawn to flickering lights. The aroma of stale coffee once more hits him decisively, a scent that has grown too intimately familiar, perhaps reminiscent of their last few rations, spirits dampened and bellicose banter tumbling forth between stubborn lips. One can easily discern that no one desires to be there, yet none dare seek the comforts of home. Being a musketeer is not simply a job, it is a relentless dance with fate. As he huddles with his comrades around the basin, a wooden trough holding frigid water, minus any semblance of cleanliness, the musketeers find camaraderie in their shared discomfort. Sloshing water against their faces, the cold feels less punishing within the warm camaraderie. They revel in the bravado of cleaning away last night's grime, scoffing at the soap that smells ironically similar to yesterday's stew, sticky, unyielding, and altogether unworthy of the luxury one might imagine of a soldier's grooming routine. Rinsing their hair in the frosty water prompts hearty laughter, transforming the morning chore into a battle of endurance rather than mere sustenance. Once adequately chastised by the briskness of the water, they don the day's uniform in cheerful disarray, perhaps not with the elegance of courtly wardrobes, but a combination of motley solutions beautifully masking the wear and tear each day ignites. Their boots cling heavily to the remnants of mud reminiscent of history's underbelly, a true companion on their daily runs. Perhaps they don't give credence to the idea of introducing such relics into the realm of elegance as they prepare to ascend to the working world outside. Instead, they embrace the earthy fragrance of their attire, a badge of honor against foes both known and unknown. Venturing further into the waking world, the sounds of a bustling market dance through the air as they step outside, the chirrup of street vendors blending seamlessly into the rustle of horses' hooves and the occasional bellow from a disgruntled mule. The musketeers plunge headfirst into the orchestrated chaos, navigating around fruit carts and vendors hawking their wares, calling out colorful prices and claiming sumptuous goods that never find their way to the meager hands of musketeers. Their mouths water momentarily, however, sharp realities shine through as pockets remain relatively devoid of coin, all smiles fading to the backdrop of profitable bartering. At this hour, musketeers know that they have no true luxuries. Life, after all, flows like the waters of the Seine. They know it exists unfathomably near yet remains tantalizingly out of reach. Focusing instead on their work billets, they listen as townsfolk exchange playful jests about the perceived valor of the musketeers, delightfully unaware that the men wearing the uniforms are little more than weary souls scuffling along bustling city streets, seeking fleeting pride amid the collective struggle. Upon arrival at the barracks, the musketeers retreat into the motions of their duties, with arms cleaning and sharpening flanked by spirited exchanges among peers. Each musketeer finds his hands busy and mind wandering, recounting moments of glory that could easily unravel into tales of farcical humor, for there is always an unyielding story behind the polished muskets. They share the burdens of life, whether it is the cutting wind, the incessant wheezing of the old barracks, or the realization that meal times are often spent without singular embarrassment. Embers of boisterous energy surge while that crackling fire persists as their minds weave tales of bravado and misadventure. As laughter fills the air, a slightly distorted picture arises, an image that a visitor might find amusingly heroic. To them, musketeers are fearless rogues filled with grand gestures and flamboyant leaping from rooftops. In truth, however, the musketeers are simply men, their capes tattered, their spirits sometimes weighed down by the reality that exists when the jesters leave the stage. Yet, not every day flows smoothly as waves upon the sea. The musketeers gather more than tales of glory. They glean lessons from their surroundings, observing neighbors stretching rations and trading merrily akin to the old allegory spun from favored folk tales over every recognizable feast. Each story they share is tethered tightly to a truth, the enduring nature of the battles beyond the trodden paths they tread. As dusk closes in, ushering shadows alongside hushed gossip, they recline with mutual acceptance of the unrefined taste of their daily hardships. In this faded light, embers glow warmly, reflecting muted hues of hard-earned friendship, the purity of bonds that run deeper than mere allegiance. The musketeers laugh at themselves and one another, perhaps a sober reminder of the absurdity of life and the exact point where valiance brushes against sheer folly. This camaraderie comes full circle as thoughts of cleaner days linger softly beneath the surface, while they share not just hollow victories but also reflections of their enduring togetherness. Their laughter draws deeper with every recollection, yet when clouds of concern spark dimly, a shared sigh resonates as conversations pivot, ever so subtly, toward their lasting vulnerability. As twilight descends upon the horizon, musketeers brazenly debate tales and histories that echo far beyond those cobblestone streets. One might recount the authenticity of moments where heroics border on comedy, the slip of a boot on fresh muck shared with hearty guffaws, or the lost musket during training tasters that emphasize the true limitations of their so-called prowess. Through these tales flickers a bittersweet harmony, a remembrance that there exists a whimsical undertone even in life's harshest battles. While memories from yesterday loom in the air, dusk ushers a fateful reckoning surrounding them. Every musketeer, engrossed in exhausting work through countless battles, learns to tread lightly upon the paths fate lays before them. As oils burn low and rations dwindle like fading stars, each day is intertwined with uncertainty, yet, leaning upon one another bleeds a solace that elevates their spirits and keeps hope afloat. And so the day gives way to an unspoken promise for tomorrow. The musketeers shall inch forward through the mercurial bends of existence, like the flickering flame that fights against the encroaching dark. In their reluctance to part with the comfort of shared warmth, they retreat into corners once more, sweeping the scathing day sketch by sketch, allowing for the fleeting repose that awaits them. The reality of their ironclad lives, however, merely dampens their spirit temporarily, providing a gateway to dreams unburdened by their waking struggles. Today they have shared laughter, woven rituals of brotherhood, moments of both triumph and agony, all swirling gracefully under a blanket of camaraderie. Should the shadows gather once more in the sanctuary of night, remember that a rich tapestry of peace you reap tonight comes freshly warm from a barrel of bountiful choices. While musketeers seek the refuge of dry hay and simple linens, you shall simply curl up beneath plush bedding that warmly cradles you in your own little corner of the room. As you slip gently into a deeper sleep, do not forget how fortunate you are, residing in a world where midnight whispers do not consist solely of rustling hay and vague wanderings to the next day, but rather filled with the soft embrace of pillows and the welcome presence of quietude. And as you rest your weary head, consider how even the mighty musketeers would surely trade the bitter taste of the day's rations for a midnight snack of hand-cut cheese and fresh fruits. The winter winds howled through the narrow lanes of La Rochelle, swirling in cold tendrils that infiltrated the very marrow of men as they huddled in makeshift shelters. The musketeers found their lives slow woven into the fabric of this crucial siege, a tale both grand and grim, where valor often lost its glimmer amid the mud and pain of war. The weight of duty pressed upon their shoulders, heavier than their muskets, thirsty for both vindication and sustenance. In the chill of their thoughts, each musketeer, donned in faded uniforms that bore the stains of combat, fumbled for warmth as they prepared for the tumult that lay ahead. The air was thick with an ominous silence, punctuated occasionally by the distant clang of carts and the cries of seagulls, a cruel reminder that life, even in wartime, persistently buzzed just outside their desperate grasp. The men leaned against the walls of their modest quarters, feet resting in muddy boots that had long lost their original impermeability, as they cinched their belts tighter, trying to ward off the gnawing hunger that became a torment within. Days stretched long, grey and monotonous, like unwelcome guests who linger too long at the table. Simple comforts eluded them, replaced by rations that dwindled astonishingly quickly, every meager morsel a negotiation between the soldier and his stomach. They were forced to make meals of the stale bread traded or scavenged, gnawing at their crusts with more determination than pleasure. On poorer days, they resorted to warm water flavored with roots, sustaining their spirits with the slightest whiff of flavor that danced ever so briefly on the palate. Tales of the siege, exchanged by the flickering light of oil lamps, colored the air with crude humor and camaraderie. Within the company of brothers, their words flowed like wine, rich and lively, yet revealing the stark truth that this brotherhood was the only company against the gnawing quietude. They recounted bloated rats skittering among the refuse, growing swell like kings amid the starved remnant of humanity, haunting their dreams more effectively than the trumpets of despair. As morning broke with scant relief, the sun struggled to peek through stormy clouds, casting shadows between the shanties of the besieged town. Musketeers grasped their weapons, ever more cumbersome against their tired frames, as they ambled out into the damp streets. The fog rolled in over the shambles of broken wall and scattered debris, encasing the pair of musketeers playing guardian with watery eyes that scanned for both enemies and provisions. On the horizon, the faint echo of cannons drew their attention, a bleak reminder that beyond the horizon lay protection cloaked in smoke and strife. The musketeers undertook their tasks under the incessant sounds of artillery, each blast of noise like a war drum echoing through their bones. It was a call to arms, encumbered by the knowledge that their stumbles could cost them dearly. They clung to their duty, partaking in various labor, from fortifying defenses to maintaining the weapons that often needed a miracle more than a Polish, ever aware of the gallant tales that blindly glorified their existence. But the tales that resided in their hearts often bore the harsh crucible of reality, tangling them in hard lessons of guilt and dreams deferred. They shared fleeting glances, small smirks that echoed through the air, even amidst grim accounts of fallen compatriots. Laughter, too, had become a means of coping. So it was that youthful chests filled with dreams grew darker as they bore witness to the loss around them. And as the days of the siege wore on, the musketeers became mere shadows of their former selves, flickering hopes dimmed against the background of relentless conflict. Familiar ghosts from yesterday joined their joining ranks, etching somber reminders behind vacant eyes, whispering tales of glory won but at a dreadful cost. Their leather reserves shrank like spirits, leaving them weary and unearthed. The smell of decay thickened in the air, permeating their makeshift barracks, distinguished only by the occasional sweetness of foul stew that bubbled in the pot. It was both sustenance and a sickness that gripped their stomachs with equal force. Even as the bolstering melodies of troops echoed on rickety rafters, they held on tightly to every morsel of hope that arrived, each splash of fortune covered in the grime of a snail crawling across damp soil. The musketeers had learned to savor both the highs and lows, though the bitter flakes upon their tongues offered anything but sweetness. It came as no surprise that amid strife, the rats feasted lavishly, devouring scraps discarded by beleaguered hunters. Stories began to circulate about a night where one frightful soldier had even attempted a culinary masterpiece, cooked rat stew, to appease ravenous comrades, his culinary ambition met with the kind of horror only war could elicit. The result was a blend of gallows laughter, with whispered daredevilry forming the battleground of their jokes, concocted from despair as they sought the comfort of levity. Curiously enough, time passed differently within the confines of siege. Minutes stretched but hours raced by, and soon the musketeers found themselves caught in an endless loop of mundane actions, cleaning muskets, checking for damp powder, patching up uniforms, whispering tales of how they would one day recount these experiences, marveling how one could find a whimsy in the heaviness of despair. The weight bore down upon them like chains, yet they found humor in their frailty. A soft laugh emerges where sweetness taints the air tinged with metallic dust and soot. Yet the sensibilities of youth clung to their hearts, slicing through the fog of hardship. The musketeers leaned whispering against the dilapidated walls, a concoction of warmth gathered around them in dispute against the relentless chill that seeped through the stones, a comfort now and then, as if to reckon with a world that whispered tales long from their dreams. The siege of La Rochelle served as both battleground and an education. Days gave way to nights, the musketeers never assuming to act as though their fate belonged solely in their hands. Survivors bore witness to the inevitable, their souls intertwined with dreams haunted by the reality of their crumbling existence. In those slow moments between crises, hints of lucidity came, revealing another layer of longing. Perhaps the warmth of a hearth and a decent bed now felt less like a luxury and more like ancient law. And thus the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows as the fires crackled and the musketeers gathered once more to share fragments of courage. Fear had invited itself into their brotherhood, yet together they kindled embers of contentment, their retold tales momentarily lifting them above the morose undercurrent that threatened to drown them. Here and now, under a ceiling made of battered wood, life flourished despite war. A half-remembered comfort lingered behind every word, even on the brink of turmoil. With soft murmurings and rasping laughter still ringing in the air, they surrendered to the hopes that emerged like tendrils through gilded dust. Adversity had wrapped its fingers around their minds, but the constant remembrance of those who shared the journey bound them together, hearts layered like old parchment, worn yet inscribed with stories that promise survival. Little by little, life continued, and the musketeers trudged through weary days and restless nights, anchored to one another beside flickering fires, constructing dreams under networks of stars, tethered to whispers of possible futures that shimmered like glints off blades at dawn. While food rations fell short, joy sparked and flared, an intoxicating amalgam that carried them through the clamor of war. As the truth of the siege solidified in their bones, their lessons were profound, rooted in the fellowship that burgeoned from their shared trials, for the musketeers were continually alive beneath layers of suffering, woven tight with laughter that floated like smoke into the quiet sky, turning the bitter into a sweet embrace nestled deeply in memory. And so they pressed on, through the injury and loss, into tomorrow, armed with the knowledge that their bond, unlike their arms, would never falter. Perhaps somehow, someday, peace might rise once more amidst the debris of their fights, a soft glow at the end of a dark tunnel, ever drifting just beyond reach. As you drift into restful thoughts, let it wash over you that your nightly struggles, by contrast, are luxuriously simple. Enjoy the warmth of comfort and allow the remnants of war to slip away from you, for tomorrow, you need only contend with the decisions of breakfasts. Until then, let the musketeer's tale settle into the gentle rhythms of your dreams. As dawn broke and the musketeers rose from sleep's gentle embrace, the looming spectre of conflict called them forth into another day. The echoes of camaraderie mingled with the quiet understanding that they were mere pawns in a game so much larger than themselves. As the sun ascended in the sky, illuminating the world with a pale sheen, so did the musketeers' tasks weigh heavy upon their shoulders. The streets, still slippery with morning dew, would soon be bustling with the sounds of a city enduring beyond the tumult of rebellion. It wasn't long before the musketeer found himself at the heart of the Mediterranean bustle as the marketplace bustled alive with merchants hawking their wares. The musketeers moved like shadows among them, concealed beneath layers of leather and wool. The armor they donned was meant both for protection against foes and as a disguise against the internal strife that threatened to unravel their very threads. From piglets squealing in the distance to the sharp bursts of laughter from children dodging between markets, life masked itself in chaos, the kind of chaos that felt almost reassuring amidst the uncertainty of war. Appending small maintenance routines to the morning was almost human instinct. The musketeers sought to galvanize their spirits among weary workloads, exchanging banter filled with wit as sharp as the blades they wielded. They might joke that if a musketeer weren't covered in mud, he simply hadn't been working hard enough. Amidst conversations, a half-eaten crust of bread made its journey between comrades. More so than the laughter echoing through the air, it was the clinking of canteen bottles that resonated. As they raised their cups to each other, the musketeers celebrated what little joy survived in their patched uniforms, riddled with stains and history. As the days stretched long, they found solace in their morning rituals, warmed by the meager fire that housed their dreams. No less than simple gestures, the small acts of kindness entwined themselves in daily existence, an extra bite shared, a warm smile offered, the odd story of nostalgia twinkling between foggy mindsets. These small moments stood shoulder to shoulder against the weight of tragic afternoons when they bore witness to the heightening chaos of the fronts. One could find an odd timbre of humor in their lot. They could sweep the battlefield clean of their absurdity and share a drink merely to punctuate the day. As the musketeers traded jests about the miseries of food, it must be noted that the culinary delights of their time were predominantly pedestrian, some might even say lamentable. A few days' worth of salted fish now swayed through their memories, deteriorating next to dreams of more satisfying prospects. The aroma wafting from kitchens held potent possibilities yet turned stale in heavy air, the kind of air where rancor and distress flavored everything. Still, as the musketeers indulged in their breakfast of tired bread and acrid soup, they took fleeting comfort in the shared bond of hardship, likening themselves as heroes in a tragedy that lacked an audience. On those particularly dismal mornings, the cloud of impending battles loomed like the fog rolling over the Seine. While musketeers were met with the heaviness of duty, the dichotomy of laughter that arose from camaraderie was all-consuming. It seemed nearly absurd to them that while their lives stood on precarious edges, the raucousness of laughter echoed through the ranks. Together, they stood amidst the whirlwinds of politics, wary that the storm simmered just beyond the horizon, a cacophony of royal ambitions, where legality and rebellion danced obscenely close. Yet, these daily encounters carried with them the scent of inevitability. Plans bloomed into schemes and suddenly backtracked into chaos as alliances swayed like the leaves in autumn. For sometimes, a musketeer could feel the unfurling troubles crackle underfoot like leaves tumbling in a winter's gale, unstable yet familiar. Chaos was the constant company that enveloped them, punctuated with flashes of human connection, where shared endeavors became fabric woven amid uncertainty. Through every grinding hour spent on fortifications and marching drills, they were forever lost in the cycles of wars that birthed neither glory nor cheers. What would they imagine traded for their next meal? Was it the musketeers' unrealistic vision of conquest, or simply the monotonous grind of keeping food on the table? Each thought coiled around the mundanity of life while ever crossing paths with the longer shadows cast by civil unrest. Battling against that very shade demanded not just swordplay but fortitude of spirit, rendering musketeers slightly grizzled yet unyielding against futures that harbored deceit and uncertainty. Observing from the edges, one could overhear whispers of nobles sharpening their political knives, enacting force where civil discourse should be. There beneath ironclad orders, the musketeers felt, almost vividly, the narrow margins between loyalty and betrayal blurring like watercolors on canvas, smudged by the hand of fate. Error was a luxury, yet the musket itself was often far too heavy and far too temperamental, a constant reminder of their mortality. With each passing moment, they fought the familiar blend of despair intermingled with grim humor, muttering bitter, sardonic quips about being free men shackled to overlords in shimmering finery. Days blurred into one another. The musketeers, ever finely tuned towards warfare, were intimately aware of the chaos brewing beneath tranquility. Divided loyalties amongst the ranks echoed in dark corners, full of longing, not solely for victory but for a sense of stability and clarity lost amid the din of aspirations. Musketeer life embodied the absurd dance shared with history and honor, which often felt equally pretentious in dreams and quite mundane in execution. One could only wonder how it all bore down upon them like the weight of wet wool, clammy and unyielding. Every dusk brought with it a reckoning that settled like dust upon their shoulders, a gentle reminder of its cohesive bond against the sorrow of despair and, perhaps, ambivalence. Yet they bore the burdens which were not merely theirs but the collective weight of an era fraught with layered challenge, like shadows enveloping the last light of day. Yet still, in those muted evenings, the musketeers gathered to reminisce about simpler times and dream of the laughter yet to emerge. Looking back, their brothers in arms were more than just warriors. They were brothers tied by the constraints of armored duty and the relentless march of societal expectations, relenting each night through whispered stories shared by the fire. It was often mentioned, lightly, with a chuckle among brothers, how the weight of history rested heavier upon the table than the table itself ever did. There lay embedded the truth that, while rigid and unyielding, these links had formed chains of iron wrapped lightly around their spirits, a bittersweet irony, indeed. Territories ebbed and flowed as the musketeers traversed swiftly through colorful memories, flashes of garish food, long-winded tales that slowly transformed into vocabulary fit for bards, and echoes of survival amidst the clouds of civilization reformed beneath them. There beneath the surface, the musketeers endured, kneading moments of warmth and kindness into a present fraught with uncertainty, with the looming specter of war, time pressed into righteous souls, sowing the abyss of trust alongside mundane existence. As night fell upon the realm, shrouded in dark beginnings, the musketeers wrapped themselves in remnants of camaraderie born of blistering days. Their hazy figures gathered around warmth, lined like mother hens brooding over their eggs, sheltering whispered aspirations while welcoming the glow of distant stars. It was within this desolate yet meaningful closing that they found innocence in shared dreams, a reminder that through the darkness, laughter remained delicately silent, waiting patiently to break forth at the slightest touch of fate. Moreover, as sleep began to weave its comforting tendrils through the air, one could consider the dichotomy of past and present, the musketeers' burdens contrasted with modern-day comforts. It may seem trivial, within the confines of your contemporary home, to dwell on indoor warmth and the accessibility of sustenance. You can sleep well in the knowledge that your evenings are simplified by conveniences that largely place battles far away, sparked solely from forgotten inconveniences. And so, when you nestle into the embrace of your sheets, remember that you rest beneath a roof of comfort. Your struggles pale in comparison to what the musketeers once endured. Truly consider how thin the veil separates you from the resilience that echoed in their tales. Laughter may now flow from easy memories and endless smiles, where life balances gently on the precipices of dreams fulfilled. After all, as long as you can navigate a short walk to the kitchen for a midnight snack, your troubles seem small, although you might not have to face the indignity of treating your rations like treasure. As another day unfurls ahead, nestled between the perennial echoes of musketeers, allow yourself to drift seamlessly into the quiet fabric of sleep, contented in the knowledge that your world is built high upon simpler foundations, where shadows of the past guide fluffy pillows toward the safe confines of your belief in brighter tomorrows. As the day meanders into the folds of the past, the essence of the musketeers lingers in those lingering scents of battle and loyalty, reminding us of their intertwined fates and clashes with authority. Yet, as dawn breaks, we encounter a world shaped by the firm hands of Cardinal Richelieu, a figure whose presence looms over their lives like a storm cloud, both oppressive and transformative. Richelieu's ambition mirrors that of feral hounds unleashed, rallying for dominance over the land. Within the stony tower walls of the cardinal's jurisdiction, plans were laid, whisking through the air thick with the incense of power, feeding his unquenchable thirst for control. In this quest, musketeers become unwitting pawns in this dramatic tax game. Their fragments of honor seem to dissolve among whispers of courtly ambitions. They are the men standing between noble facades and the crumbling reality of existence, where gold weighs heavy against their humble but proud calls to arms. With every tale recounted over fires, an unmistakable bitterness surfaces from echoes of Richelieu's policies, embedded deep within their bones like the chill of a winter night. While they themselves hold muskets that feel far older than their years, the omnipotent and youthful vigor of the cardinal pushes forward unfazed, each tax exacerbating disparities of wealth, a play verified by past and present alike. Talk in the barrack swirls around the looming threats demanded of their wallets. They hear the chink of coins rooted deeply in hunger, a cruel reminder that each piece of silver likewise adheres to the sweat of their brows, churning a mixture of frustration and solidarity into often flavored porridge. On any dreary evening engulfed in smoke from the sputtering fire, musketeers would find their attention drawn to one another's tired faces, sharing half-finished tales of battles they had survived, but often lacing them with darker queries. The truth of what was former glory feels far from tangible among their ranks, shaded by a grey hue only the weary can recognize. The royal splendor shining like false gold often appears out of reach, the mirage tempered by light reflected upon them. Royal decrees appear at odds with their beleaguered spirits. They long to hear songs of victories that lift their spirits hourly, tales narrated by the oldest among them. Let the new generation's crescendo tales of gallant battles that fade where yawns beckon rest. For a moment's reprieve can be found, wrapped in lullabies of shared stories threaded together by the delicate hands of memories and aged camaraderie that weave from grimace to laughter, forming a fabric that sustains them through the oppressive weight of watchful eyes. Meanwhile, as the burden of taxes mounts and rusted chains intertwine with obligations they never requested, musketeers daringly balance not just arms but their beliefs too, tethering themselves to the lofty mantle of loyalty, unaware of how this allegiance dances wildly upon a tightrope of instability. They labored under the misapprehension of having a firm foundation, with people beyond them working restlessly to maintain the facade of stability, 1,000 invisible strings conspiring in the shadows. Fortresses of instability rise around them, as Richelieu's authority carves deeper into their daily lives. Musketeers find themselves in the relentless swirl of transitioning power structures. Compatibility and discontent become two sides of the same coin. It's a vintage paradox that may very well apply to contemporary life. For as citizens abroad make sacrifices willingly, some musketeers lament that their sacrifice appears as utilizing an old tool rather than penning their own ambitions on parchment. Meanwhile, musketeers gather in corners of taverns, gobbling down meager rations, their collective groaning rivals the cacophony of local markets, all cheekily adorned with wares unyielding to elitism. Their patched garments and leather armor bespeak the struggles of earning their keep. They become unwitting mascots for everyone harboring the daily heavy burdens, a reminder that nobility and royalty's comfort seldom meet the coarse fabrics of the ordinary. Bursting applause for Richelieu's successes at court seems a world away, muffled by the ongoing conversations murmuring through the walls of a room where musketeers hoard ambitions like grains of salt against their skin. It is within these halls that they hold tight to tales of battlefield fervor, where whispers oscillate against new forces emerging, each day a reminder of the unfurling plight of lower-class souls bound by both valor and economic sacrifice. Every banter traded preserves their hope, their collective dreams sowing patches of trust that slice through darkness. Yet, amid musings of exchange over card games, one might ponder the weight of duty, reflected in nighttime walks plagued by sound. The echoing clinks of crumpling coins sound like shadows laughing over the mist riches, echoing through candlelit. When tomorrow greets you, flatteringly wrapped in the intent to de-escalate flickering memories into restful moments, remember how much easier it is to find comfort drowned in pillows rather than bare soil. See how history unravels when lifted by respect into some semblance of balance, even one with plenty of snacks and no mud-streaked boots. The culture of loyalty and brotherhood among musketeers forms a resilient fabric that is tightly woven through shared experiences and collective hardships. They do not simply stand shoulder to shoulder in battle. Their lives intertwine like the roots of ancient oaks nestled close together in an effort to weather any storm. The bond is palpable, founded on laughter that sneaks through their daily toil under the shadowy canopy of discontent. It is a unique cocktail of abject poverty mixed with unwavering loyalty, all served in pewter cups during twilight frolics around dwindling fires which flicker like their stories, a warmth that holds them together, quelling fears of what lies beyond each setting sun. As their spirits rise amongst hearty laughter, the musketeers often shoulder their burdens imaginatively, transcending the dire tales of dry rations and unclean quarters to weave a symphony of camaraderie rich with playful banter. The dense smells of tar and sweat rise as they tend to one another, swapping tales of dishonor, wrapped in humor, as they lean against the weathered walls of dilapidated inns. Here, they recount battles fought, not just with swords and muskets, but with fervor against the mundane, transforming sheer survival into artistry painted upon the canvas of fleeting moments. The night air is tender yet heavy as it wraps itself around their meager campfires, where every ghostly wisp of smoke carries murmurs of fallen comrades, stories painted from the memories they can barely grasp in wakefulness. A camaraderie that swells within each hearty toast shared, punctuated by the taste of sour wine and the laughter that stings just a little like the chill in the air, reminding them that they are indeed alive. They may not relish abundant feasts, yet the powerful taste of shared sacrifice overrides culinary dismay. Banter bursts forth amid cheers and jeers, providing an elixir that quenches not only their thirst but also their spirits, capable of dissolving the unrelenting grasp of despair that dwells on the fringes of their otherwise drab existence. A curtain of silence can sometimes fall suddenly, like shadows swallowed by the twilight, as stories reach into the depths of grim realities, absent friends, lost in fogged memories, never to rise again. Yet the camaraderie reignites under those soft stars, where flames dance and tell of resilience in a struggle that wades against life's torrents, desperately clinging to any shred of hope. To be a musketeer is to endure and embrace the depths of sorrow and levity alike, much like how one would hold another's hand around a warm fire. They do not run from sorrow, they embrace it as a part of the morose beauty encircling their orders. And with a soft chuckle, we step back into the realm of economics, where the struggle for arms reflects the world outside the musketeer's bond. They grapple with an ever-demanding market, an economic ballet of scarcity and desperation, wandering the labyrinthine streets where half-finished swords languidly adorn merchant stall displays, tempting, yet often out of reach. It is a cruel joke beneath the sunlit skies, where promised rewards twist into rusted relics, mere whispers of glorious afternoons marked by triumph. Despite their considerable sacrifices, musketeers find themselves vying for inadequate arms that echo their ordinariness. It's a classic case of catching a slice of hope while drowning in puddles of muddy misfortune. As they tread the filthy streets, their surroundings whisper of dreams dashed by the heavy hands of fate, where a blacksmith's hammer clanks away, a sound that resonates with both energy and futility, framing their most basic desires in stark relief against the backdrop of endless conflict. A steadiness flows through when they gather around local workshops, where the atmosphere is thick with the smell of smoldering metal and tempering iron, a small sanctuary around which fatigue disperses, even if momentarily. Friends share glances and smiles laden with understanding that only time-honored comrades carry. They are aware that richly ornamented swords do not shield them from battles, not while their neighbors hoard rewards and their boots continue to squelch in the muck. The blacksmiths, weary and battered, posture behind their fires, forging not just arms but also fate under punitive conditions. As supplies ebb beneath desires that languish unfulfilled like autumn leaves drifting unnoticed on dampened streets. Conversations weave in surrender to the harsh economic realities that paint a stark portrait of the musketeers' lives. Many lament their fates, speaking softly of unlit futures, while some lash out with an impassioned, emboldened humor, suggesting that their once glorious armaments might have been better served crafting ornate chandeliers instead. Riches drip away, as smiles flicker and punctuate every dark remark shared in shadows of wanting, where even discussions of craftsmanship swing deep into the realms of absurdity, all while the haunting notion remains that each sword they fancy may very well become a rusted companion against their skin in the next bout of trouble. But alas, there exists a spark of hope. A dream lingers like the scent of wood smoke that fills their lungs when they return to familiar grounds. They forge ahead, carrying imprints of dreams, building bridges against the stormily foreboding landscapes that they tread. From battlefield discussions echoing off the broken tavern walls to mundane exchanges on resource allocations, each interaction builds a historical tapestry clinging rigidly to their identities, seemingly devoted to transforming mere existence into something more, a longing for the glory of tales spun by flickering torchlight in distant halls, far removed from this realm of mud and drudgery. Indeed, this curious existence finds reprieve in the communal rituals where musketeers blend tales of corruption and nobility, piecing together a formidable shield of laughter against the swirling uncertainties. Where whispers of dissatisfaction filter through the joviality, they cling to fragile moments, momentarily shielding them from impositions of their own lovely humdrum dance of existence. Yet, authenticity taps gently at their shoulders, smirking in acknowledgement of reality, that their swords may simply serve as props in a play that speaks of nobler warriors, those unseen puppeteers from distant lands controlling their fates. Thus, In this world, musketeers thrive amidst unpredictability and lingering smells of ale, longing for moments of grace amidst rustic beauty. They learn to balance their sense of duty with the irony that lies deeply embedded in their existence, where survival stands as an uninvited guest at every humble gathering. It brings forth the gentle laughter that flows freely, even if cloaked in cynicism, where they ardently remark how amusingly cruel it is that war and brotherhood together shape the lifeblood that courses through their veins, molded by one weapon of choice, humor, tempered and sharpened by shared struggles. As we gently wander from discussions of arms and the precious stories binding musketeers in a laborious embrace, let's find our way back to the basics, through the corridors of time, where every mundane detail runs parallel to modern experiences, where conversations hint at similarities oh so close to home, except for the dining plate that is free from the clawing grasp of dirt, and those earthen floors that are cleaned at intervals, at best. Remember, you lucky listener, that the only battles fought now are those over smart devices and late-night snacks within the comfort of radiant homes that bring warmth and convenience with ease stirred into every bite. So when you retire beneath your quilt tonight, you might muse at how remarkably simpler life can feel when nestling into beds minus damp straw, and how pillows ease the burden of worldly concerns. Perhaps you will even smile sardonically at how you, too, might be rising to fight the great worry of who will finish the last slice of pizza come morning. In this way, we observe, from a distance, with grateful hearts each molding progression that flies by, weaving those historical echoes into a softly muted tapestry rich with textures and stories rich in shared perturbances, forging peace amidst laughter, while shaping tomorrows that soften hardships once born. Amid the haze of camaraderie and friendly jests, musketeers often serve as unwitting chroniclers of their time, weaving subtle threads of truth into the grand narratives told in taverns. They toss their heads back, allowing laughter, deep, guttural chuckles, to erupt, echoing against the rough-hewn walls, like waves slapping against the hull of their morning conversations. This was no gathering of would-be lords, but men bonded by a thin veil of fabric and a thicker layer of shared disappointment, each mouthful of gruesome stew a testament to resilience more than indulgence. As the morning sun creeps higher, dappling the dusty streets of Paris with warm hues, musketeers can't help but swap tales that slip into the realm of the absurd, glancing from serious discussions about loyalty and valor to the anemic fare they'll march for, phantoms of armies lost in the fast-eroding mists of history. Their lives tread the delicate balance between virtue and deep-seated hunger. The stories shift from the glory of past conquests to the price of a loaf of bread, itself more of a brick than a meal. In their camaraderie, every clink of wooden mugs against rough-hewn tables mimics the battle sounds they all dread, drawing silhouettes that swirl like smoke against the eye of a roasting flame. Each stare into the flickering fire draws forth memories of the distant battles against the Spanish, the sounds of clashing swords serving as background to gruff voices sharing tales of bravery that often dissolve into silly, exaggerated renditions, where they stylishly downplay the heroic duties they're often expected to undertake. Here, humor weaves its way through the somberness of their lives like a mischievous light pushing through damp, cold air, subverting the looming shadows of duty. Food and warfare are akin in their unpredictable nature, each meal a chance gamble where privilege is hardly a factor at play. On quiet evenings, they ponder how the nobles consume lavish dishes while they themselves are bestowed with the remnants of society's table scraps. How simple it must be to fill one's belly with a fragrant feast instead of their reliable fare and insipid gruel that coats the throat like regret, and yet, as they sip their low-quality wine, they still extract joy from their circumstances, interspersing their tales of gallantry with poignant mockery of a society that defines them. A toast, one might announce, half-heartedly lifting a mug, for the rats that have better feasted than we. This proclamation, punctuated with roars of collective laughter, acknowledges their shared plight, transforming despair into comic relief. Their lives revolve around the notion that perhaps some form of brotherhood has merely evolved into a familial jest, an innate truth that lies upon the well-worn paths of camaraderie. Thus, with a heavy heart lightly masked in unshed tears, our musketeer might narrate tales of old alliances only to find themselves evoking laughter on long, fog-laden evenings that bleed into dawn before turning serious again when war draws near. As friendships forge deeper, the collective memory of the musketeers harnesses steadfast bond, a tapestry intertwined with vulnerability, strengthened through fists clasped atop one another, declaring, "Here's to our days of dwindling provisions." Perhaps it is on the weary fringes of such storytelling that they glimpse their own fleeting ambitions and the realities that bolted straight against dreams of honor. The joke shared amid those rugged lodgings soon becomes less of a facade and more of an acceptance of the tenuous nature of heroism cloaked in the drudgery of existence, the simplicity of surviving alongside one another. We might ponder how, when seekers of companionship recline on their beds of modern comforts, they find no need to share the kind of laughter that masks pain with the zeal often reserved for joyous celebrations. Amusingly, it's worth noting that while we stick our heads in our tablets marveling at the tales of sword-wielding adventures, the musketeers grip their rusted arms, waiting for tales to unfurl, yet meanwhile mustering the friendly engagement they needed to go through another day. And as each tale settles upon the weary ears of listeners and laughter swells again, one could almost hear the sigh of relief waft through the room, as if one collective breath exhaled the burdens waiting outside. The truth lingers like smoke in the air, from meals composed of what nature had to offer to discovery through brotherhood that every crack within their heart still could find laughter sprouting like wildflowers from cracked pavements. Now, let's gently wade deeper into the murky waters of battles, life on the battlefield and its harsh realities, and perhaps moments of tragic irony, the paradoxical ballet of those who wear uniforms stained not just by dust and sweat, but also by the weight of expectation carried through every reverberating cry of command. Amid these struggles, musketeers awaken to the alarm clocks of turmoil and tales of heroism dressed in simple vests. Each dawn stirs new confusion as they gather around campfires, the flickering flames a reminder of both warmth and restlessness as they recount how the world twists itself into fate's fantastical tale, perpetually whispering promises of glory. Forward, then, we press into the profound realities of conflict as it unfolds with stolid reflections of musketeers teetering between valor and absurdity. The musketeers' world stands shaped by sweeping ventures through smoke and blood, where the clanging of swords is but an overture concealing a symphony of risk. The call to arms is omnipresent, echoing not merely the sounds of war but also an ever-lingering miasma of the decrepit state of their weapons. Every challenge demands iron that, unfortunately, behaves often more like rusted chains around their ankles, bemoaning they enter skirmishes without the edge sharpened by years of skillful craftsmanship. Musketeers who stood amongst forges witness forth the dedication of artisans, struggling within the stifling smoke clouds of their own charcoal fires mixing with the visible despair reflected in their glances. They come to understand that their fates are catapulted by men whose strength lies not just in muscles but in resourcefulness against the grim backdrop of availability, a culinary celebration of community turning sour when supply runs thin. Each visit to the forges reveals stories penned in iron and steel, a juxtaposition against stories told by riverbanks among children who have yet to learn of such pathos. Musketeers leave feeling both proud and distressed, knowing that those rusty weapons tucked beneath their arms were salvageable versions of what they could possess, much like the promises of safety that dance along soldiers' dreams but often find themselves punctured by the harsh reality of life itself. In this charming paradox rests the backdrop against which their tales unfold. And thus, in this dismantled reality, musketeers collectively labor under the unforgettable scrutiny that shapes them. With humor holding court and sarcasm as their sword, This chamber of clandestine conversations rides through visions of barrels storing freshly tanned hides and hands constantly hovering over each forge. If the forging can be reconciled with survival, inevitably they become not just simple soldiers but esteemed keepers of legacy, where pockmarked blades hold the memories of struggles only masked by the layers of bravado they don on each setting sun. Days slip into nights with shared rations sounding like declarations of war against the insatiable hunger lurking at their heels. Their laughter, even when strained, tides them forth like waved cradle ships casting reminders of bravery amongst the salty retrospects of history. One always becomes buoyed by the bonds of those shared moments where grumbling stomachs take backseat to vocal tales of the past, where glimpses of heroism offer both solace and irony against bleak culinary landscapes. Once more, let us shift out of the fires of absurdity and aggression, pouring ourselves into reflection as we come to terms with the heartfelt simplicity underpinning lives spent in brutal earnestness. Underneath the strains of those survival instincts lies a haunting simplicity, much akin to today's chaotic world, where we crave not just sustenance but connection. As the musketeers caressed each morsel, struggling between laughter and remnants of unrevealed tears, their stories mold into something both raw and touching, where their ongoing battles echo beneath hauntingly familiar circumstances. Dear listener, when exploring this recollection, remember that you, not just in times of strife, bear the privilege of choice, whether it be an array of foodstuffs or the shadow of sorrow. In opening our eyes, we become privy to how far down the rabbit holes of scattered rations we've ventured. While musketeers despaired over their muddy stew, you simply shrug off the notion of bare essentials lingering in your pantry, perhaps even chuckling lightly at the absurd luxury of stumbling upon snacks as you flow seamlessly to the edges of your evenings. Now, reflect on how you too masterfully engage battles over dinner food choices rendered ever simpler beneath the warm, welcoming roofs you inhabit. Oh, such a marvel it is, the echoes of hardship joined today by newfound comforts, a far cry from the days where musketeers rose only to taste bitter portions. Thus, let us once more step outside the stubborn mirage of food and forges, only now shifting toward something exquisite in the guise of memories and brotherly loyalty stitched within the hearts of those who lived through tumultuous tides, echoes buried beneath the weight of masculinity and duty. For what else could emerge from spilled ale and missed rations if not a sense of belonging, a fraternal embrace that bands together musketeers against the pain of existence, softening borders that ought to confine them? Within each clink a vessel raises laughter and stories. The musketeers find the contours of their lives exquisitely bound by moments that tether them together, so often shared in the hushed hours around dimly lit tavern fires. One can almost feel the weight of the air saturated with smoke, curling upwards, mingling with the hearty laugh of a comrade or the warm punch of a shared beverage, spiced with an essence that might once have been comforting but now smells vaguely like burnt wood and old memories. Evenings in such establishments serve as a curious blend of solace and sorrow, offering them a rare chance to vent frustrations over their bubbling pots, each murmur of camaraderie and grumble about food shortages echoing off the wooden beams, creating a warped symphony of desperation and levity layered within. The walls of their failing taverns are not just crumbling plaster, but also stories of the many who have shared in their revelry, each word dangling in the soft glow of oily lanterns, framing flickering shadows that dance alongside tales of woe. Generously crowned by dubious poets speaking their verses in raucous tones, the musketeers listen in earnest, sharing jokes that conceal their vulnerabilities, for laughter, they have found, requires a certain commitment to facing the absurdity of their daily lives. Here, mirth is a cloak, frayed but warm, that wraps around them, shielding their thoughts from the bleak realities outside, where cannon fire and the distant cries of battle become a part of the evening's soundtrack, an unsettling lullaby for those trained to live amidst chaos. As the night stretches on, tales of the Spanish Armada wash over them, a narrative that blends seamlessly into their shared experience. Each musketeer grasps his cup ever tighter, acknowledging how fleeting success can be, sipping questionable brews that may bring warmth but can hardly wash away the bitterness of past defeats. They remark on the folly of grand naval ambitions, the irony thick like the stew they share. They envision ships caught in storms, as powerless as they feel in the face of royal decrees dictating their futures. It is a strange comfort, lightening its path between the realms of laughter and remorse, the discussion treading daringly close to idle dread. In those moments spent warm against the chill of uncertainty, thoughts drift toward the sunken ships of their enemies, the flat, submerged hulls lingering in memory like a missed opportunity, like the faces of comrades who once shared their fortitude but have since faded into stories as silent witnesses. Can you believe they thought they could conquer the seas with all that fancy would? One musketeer quips, taking another luxurious sip from his cup as comrades burst into laughter, reveling in the absurdity of the losses they could neither control nor comprehend. Of course, the spirit of competition remains tethered within their ranks as they grapple over who might have stolen the most rations or whose luck had run out in a nearby dispute over a village's meager offerings. The tension plays almost rhythmically between jest and genuine frustration. Beards and scruffy mustache twitch with anticipation, as each tale become exaggerated amongst a band of men who have come to tether their identities to each other, despite the smudges of war and cruelty stamped upon their clothes, faceless and growing tired of routine battles that seem endless. Then, the conversation invariably shifts toward the looming specter of the next campaign, yet another directive that will see them trudging through mud, shattered dreams manifesting beneath the weight of royal banners. There's betrayal encoded in their expected loyalty, fought through clenched teeth as musketeers recount the tactics of their own leaders, while whispers of insurrection pitter-patter around fiery tongues, igniting debates of loyalty and survival amid shared hardships. Who among them can lay claim to fidelity when their very lives are bartered like useless coins, mere pawns on a board of wildly ambitious rulers coaxing them toward another bloody affair? What are we if not an extension of their will? One questions amidst sloshed mugs, thick shadows drawn across their solemn faces. Unpredictable shadows dance within the hearth's flickering flames, igniting flutters of melancholy flaring against the backdrop of dreams unsought, while musky fragrances unfurl in the mingling of sweat and spirits igniting laughter above darker thoughts. It is a moment to reflect, a shared recognition of their transitory existence. It lingers there, perched precariously between nostalgia and inevitability. Each musketeer gazes into his goblet, sometimes pondering whether they are not just actors in a grand play, forcing themselves to don roles that no one outside these walls comprehends. Words of passion mingle awkwardly with jest, their stories of anxious anticipation and fleeting camaraderie conjuring tales more grand than their shared realities. Yet in fits of laughter, they each acknowledge the hollow core remaining, each clink of their vessels vying for strength mid swirling uncertainty, illuminating the stark contrast between their raw spirits and the indifference meted out by fate itself. Yet, amidst the blends of mirth, a moment of shared silence settles in, an eerie gesture that speaks of their shared acknowledgement, the very essence of duty that clangs like a distant church bell, reminding them of roles performed not for glory but survival. By morning, the daylight will return with its burdensome tasks and lonely armor, but within these walls they seek solace together, a moment of refuge before stepping back into scorned battles. Ah, how quaintly they might watch the dawn rise from their wooden benches, as sunlight empties into the tavern, spilling warmth over their weary frames, too often cloaked in tired resignation, huddled together to stave off an overwhelming sense of duty. The air tinged with the scent of flour-baked bread and memories shared, the musketeers break away from shadows, grasping fleeting joys woven from the fragments of their reality, too few and too far between. When morning comes crashing, all too suddenly, with its inevitable duties, they exchange seasoned glances, comrades turned brothers, as they step from the warm embrace of their tavern into the biting chill of the world where they clutch musty uniforms, creating new layers of history on their soaked sleeves. They brush away the dust of each evening's revelry, charged with raucous echoes of laughter that never quite escapes the clutches of goodbye. So, they'll tread onward, musketeers molding their daily lives into tapestries laced with humor, forged from discontent, a strange kind of joy echoing within the deep murmur of purpose that persists as they brave what is yet to come. Each breath laced with laughter carries them toward another unavoidable dawn, one foot stepping into duty while the other lags behind, clinging to the dappled remnants of shared dreams and fleeting moments, where real duties and friendships dance just beyond the looming shadow of the unknown. And so, dear listener, you lay within warmth far removed from the musketeer's toil, within the homeliness of thick blankets and the glorious comforts of indoor plumbing, where laughter lingers more than its echoes. Recall that your rations sit stashed behind carefully organized cabinets, so lavishly adorned with modernity and ease, weaving together your own choices in such a manner that would have puzzled those valiant soldiers. When the time arrives for sleep, know that you, too, have ventured from your own trials of the day like restless musketeers seeking refuge from the woes of life, even while wrestling with the vital choices of what to have for dinner. At this gentle juncture, let us navigate from camaraderie toward the encircling whispers of relentless bravado, where tales may once again stir, now unfortunate yet incredibly relatable, steeping us in a calming brew of musket smoke and laughter, reminding us of the timelessness of human aspiration, woven thick in the fabric of history. Our next rendezvous awaits in seemingly endless conflicts, leading us deeper toward the veil of warfare, the turbulence of a world at odds. When next we resume this melodic drift through the echoes of yesterday, we'll unravel the cloaks of ambition undulating with spontaneous fervor, the musketeers poised at the edges of their duties, pulsing with rhythm matched only by the rumbles of their daily existence. As we prepare to peer into yet another realm of honor and strife, we recognize the weight of clarity, of fleeting steps from those who walked the grounds well before us. May laughter rise forth like morning dew upon freshly washed linen. What a spectacle exists when futures brazenly embrace realities harvested from history's fertile soil. Typically, when one finds themselves lost within spirals of time, let us descend into the ceaselessness as we navigate through wars, revolutions, and the legacies birthed upon mudded fields. After all, what greater a role do we play than to swap blustering whims of valor for the safety of our stories, a coalition of shared light unfurling amidst the troublesome secrets of our past? Each talon of history is burdened with rays of laughter, eternally cradled to the echoes of a truth that remains steadfast against both dusk and dawn. So now we wander on, venturing through battles unbroken, as musketeers thrust into the midst of chaos merge with a sense of unity, a dance upon the battlefield mirroring the eternal cycle of strife and solace intertwined. And as thoughts tread lightly across this realm of history, a whisper arrives, beckoning us gently to turn our minds to the delicate narratives of honor and betrayal, a more profound entanglement than we have yet explored. Thus, let us embrace the rhythm of heartbeat steadying against the weight of consequence, unraveling the chorus of valor and duty while inching closer to the heavy echoes radiating from past glories that linger faintly in the ether, like the last vestiges of a candle flickering.